Alright, greetings. This is the first in what I hope will be a couple tutorials on um, programming, advanced programming for game engines, making your own engine for games, thinking about the underlying principles that work therein. And the reason for it is when you understand the inner workings of something, you know whether or not you need to make changes to the underlying functionality. You know, if it's built the way you need it to work, or you have to kind of build it, change it around, and build it another way. You also know how to make those changes, and you hopefully better understand others' code. So if you're using a library or any other subset of tools, you can analyze it, break it apart, jump in there, and make changes if you need to make changes. And this is also a programming tutorial, right? Which means the difference between programming and scripting is that the programmer's goal is to make the tools. Scripter's goal is to use the tools. Programmer's goal is to, you know, when you're making the tools, to make it dynamic, reusable. And the scripter's goal is to make it work with the tools available. You don't really know how it works in the underlying subset, and if you don't know how to make it work and you don't have the tools available, you have to kind of speak to a programmer to get it to work. So this is a programming advanced engine programming tutorial with Flash. And the reason why we're using Flash, well, there are a number of different reasons, but Flash is a it's modular, it's strong typed programming language, lets you see mistakes, lets you debug those mistakes, run into issues. Alright, it's got a compiler, it's got a debugger, and we'll probably go into more detail as to how you use those. It lets you it's simpler than some languages, and it shares most of the functionality of advanced languages. It doesn't share everything, but it has the basis of what those advanced languages use. Shares a lot in regards to the syntax, like how you create things, how you make things work, and the functionality. Flash is also everywhere. So, let's see if I got this. Right, when Flash originally started out, it was just an animation tool, like you click and you play, and it did the animations fairly well. Very beautiful, very vibrant. Sound and otherwise, but I've muted all my sounds so you won't hear it. You can definitely Google it. This is the Bitey of Brackenwood. It's very, very beautiful, very, very awesome. Probably a very early animation. And the benefits of doing animations this way was, like, even if you take a look at the date on this thing, 2004, you couldn't get things into the web that were very, very large. Right? So you had to really optimize it. You had to really make it small, and Flash was all vector-based, so they could really crunch down, you know, the calculations, the amount of the data, the size of files, and allow it to get everywhere. The other thing is it's used in a lot of different tools, and this is just one we probably use on one of the more common bases, which is something like YouTube. It's a video player. We just click on it, we can do anything we want. Alright, right click, it's Flash. Right click, it's Flash. And it kind of just runs and works. We also have it for, like, visualizers. So when we're playing different things, like in Newgrounds, they use it as a tool for a straight up visualizer. Show you what your music kind of looks like, And I'm probably killing it because I've got other things running in the background. But definitely go to Newgrounds. If you see their visualizer, it's a pretty powerful tool. Allows you to access, lots and lots of information. And you can even create music. There are programs out there that built in Flash allow you to create music straight through Flash, and it's all synthesized dynamically. It's all just crunching numbers. The other thing is always games, right? So you've got games, a whole variety. It's very easy to build, very easy to get out there. And you even have other game engines porting to it. You have games for mobile and online, very, very advanced, running off the GPU. And this is something like Unity running inside a Flash. They built a port because it's so dynamic, gives you so much power, so much control, they could basically pull their engine into Flash and get it all working. I have the same, similar kind of tutorial with UDK, which is a huge engine. Kind of click. This is just a demo, Epic Citadel demo, but it shows you them getting things running and working in their world. Right click is the telltale sign of something's Flash. It says about Adobe Flash at the bottom. So right click, yep, built in Flash. Right click, built for Flash, running in Flash at the very least. And lots of different things. Whole variety of different things. So Newgrounds, you can go to Play Games, Armor Games, you can go to take a look at a variety of different sites out there. But it's very prevalent. It's also very self-contained, right? So if you ever see Flash games, they're usually just compiled into a single file. So if I were to load up Angry Bots, we can see it's got some sort of preloader. It's loading the single file. It's done. You don't have to worry about loading the assets or handling fail cases, which is also very good. You don't have to worry about making sure all the assets are together. One thing is that it is consistent across platforms, which means you don't have to compile it multiple times. Obviously, if you're using an engine like Unity, you'd want to do that anyway to get additional performance. But if you're building something natively in Flash or using a Flash library, then you don't really have to worry about that. There are also a lot of free tools. So, if you want to build things in Flash, there are libraries, and these are just game related. Make Flash games. This one's very, very popular. Flashpunk, and paired with the and this is a library, so built inside of the Flash. When you compile a Flash game and you reference the libraries and build it a certain way, you can get a whole subset of functionality without having to do anything. Flash itself is a library, a tool set. It gives you certain plugins for functionality, so they provide their own subset of functionality. So this one's pretty good for desktop, browser games. This one's specifically geared toward running off the GPU. And as such, it's very, very popular for desktop, mobile, and web games. Alright, and we've even taken a look at some of these games over here actually are for mobile, and they've been published to multiple platforms. Also taken on by very popular companies, right? It's a very powerful tool. Now, if you don't have the Flash IDE, which is this thing behind me, right, you don't really have to worry about it, because this thing costs about like $700, but Adobe does something very special, which I always love. They kind of give their software away for free, which means If you don't have Flash, you can download something like Flash Develop, which is a developer environment, and program strictly in there. And in fact, if all your assets are raster, are that means they're not vector drawn or dynamic or anything, then defined mathematically, you could probably skip the Flash IDE entirely. You don't even need it. And if you want to build your levels, so you get some guy to make your assets in GIMP, some sort of free drawing environment, and you could build your levels out with something like an Ogmo editor, which is also another tool which spits out XML that you could, if you're using Flashpunk, can be directly tied in, but very easy and modular to just build into like any other library. So it is, and also there's a lot of information. There's a lot of feeds. Things are always happening with it. I'm constantly amazed at the tools that are being built and things that are functional. It's a very active community, and there's a lot of potential. Oculus Rift stuff, collision and physics stuff. Lots of different libraries out there. I've only just shown you just a handful. This is an engine, games coming out that use a lot of the advanced functionality that's available. And if you have a really strong underlying grasp of what's going on, you can take full advantage. And this is in any environment. So Flash is just a good place to start, but you can take it anywhere, right? It's completely portable. Programming is programming once you sort of get the hang of it. There's a little bit of syntax stuff, but what your goal is essentially the same thing. As a programmer, you want to make things modular, reusable. You also have to read others' code. It's sort of like, choose your own adventure novel, where you've no idea where you're starting, you have no idea where you're ending, and you just sort of jump in there. Right? You hit a block and you have to backtrack a little bit and take a look at some more information. Read all the possible paths. So this is also very important. It gets you thinking into modular design, and this is also applicable to things other than games. But games is probably the easiest thing to really see it in. Let's see. So through this, my goal is to help you build something like have the know-how and the knowledge to build out, a subset of different functionality, and hopefully you'll end up with, games that kind of are super dynamic, modular, and that work in a variety of different cases. And they can do very fancy things. And because they're modular, you can do a lot of fancy different things. You can offload a lot of different functionality, such as collision detection, as well as but that's essentially it. This is hopefully you can get something like this by the end of it. The tutorials kind of follow the Flash runtime, Flash IDE for the most part, but it's also we'll probably switch over to Flash Develop to programming because it's a much nicer programming tool. So if you don't have it, my recommendation is install it, and if you don't have Flash, just install it anyway. That's what you should install, and be using that instead of Flash. And all the functionality is carried over. You can use Flash Develop, and so these two I showed you were actually made directly in Flash. But you can even have things that are run straight off of the Ogmo editor, and I can show you, some of the stuff that has been done off of Ogmo as well, using the same kind of principles. but for another time. Um, let's see, what else should be covered? But that's it. The goal of object-oriented programming. Well, this is sort of the goal of the class is, or the tutorial, is reusability and simplicity. If it's simple and reusable, you can get a lot more done, as opposed to, having to build things a lot more times. And there's a lot of different principles that I hope you're already familiar with. This is hopefully not an introduction to your first programming course. I'll try to go over a lot of the different syntax and things that you can theoretically do to start off with. But even the whole entire point is, if it's simple and reusable, here I've got a player and he can collect either of these objects. And if I want, I can just make it, just pull things out, make it dynamic so that it doesn't break if in different scenarios and cases. You can, just add as many of these things you want to the world, and it should just run. And that's sort of the goal of OOP, object-oriented programming. And that's sort of what I hope that we'll run through as well. So the first thing, also the format of this tutorial is going to be, I'll give you attempts. I'll tell you to try and do some certain things, and you'll try and do them. So I'll say, try to do this or try to do that, give you a head start. When I say to try and do something, my recommendation is that you actually do try it. It'll give you a better understanding of how things work, gets you thinking about code as opposed to just listening to me show you how to do things. That's also effective, can work if it's completely over your head, but definitely start thinking about these things. So the resources of a programmer is that is the most important thing, and it doesn't really matter where you're doing it, what you're using it for. It's the reference documentation. So if I were to search AS3 reference, the first thing you get is the documentation. And why is it so important to a programmer? Because it tells you everything you can do in a language. It doesn't matter if you're programming in C# or Java or JavaScript. Well, the reference documentation is the most important. It allows you to see what you can do, and also gives you the ability to do it. All the possibilities are here. You can do tons and tons of different things. A whole bunch of different libraries are at your disposal. But if you don't know what they do or where to find them, then you can't do anything. And usually the easiest way to use this thing is to just put your class name at the top. You could even just Google AS3 movie clip, and probably the first link is going to be the AS3 API reference. Click on that, which was a little faster. This one takes you outside, but and it shows you everything that's available. And I'll show you how to use this in a little bit, but essentially all the properties that are available are here. Now this is the complete list. This is what's just in the movie clip class, but as you scroll down or up, it gives you a list of everything. And this is going to be your strongest tool. Shows you what you can and cannot do. And I'll go into the details of how this kind of works in a little bit. Logging information is also very important, so I'll just do a quick demo. Always be sure to save when you first start off. So I'm going to put this one in my temp directory. Let's go to desktop, temp, and I'm going to call this workshop. And new folder, workshop 1. I'm going to call you workshop, or we'll call this game. Why not? And to get started, the first thing we want to do is we want to create a class. And so this class is going to be, we'll call it main. This is, what generally the document class is. Name, but you can call it whatever you want. Doesn't really matter what the name is. And the first thing, and here's the other thing. So I said reference documentation is the one thing. The other thing is logging information out to the screen, which means if I want to debug or give myself some information, how do I do it? Just kind of use this function called trace, and there's probably a API reference that tells you how it's used, but see if I can find it. Trace. There it is, top levels, functions. So these are global functions, means you can access them anywhere, and trace is one of them, right? Tells you how to use it, what to expect. And this is the basic example, hello world. I'm going to do the same thing. Hello kitty. And it'll debug, it'll trace out this text to us. There it is, output. Hello kitty. And you can trace any number of things, debug information. This is pretty important because you just don't want it to be text. You also want to, what if it's a number that's going wildly askew? So you trace out numbers too, mathematical equations. You can trace out any subset of information, And we'll see some more about that in a little bit. And the other thing is debugging. So if I say var I is of, let's say, type number, or even if we were to say it was a type movie clip, but yeah, I don't want to get way ahead of myself, but suffice it to say debugging, and I'll show you that in a little bit. Those are all the things you can kind of do. So when you're using examples online, it's very important to note that examples are merely a reference for implementation of functionality, not the implementation. So if you find a really cool site and it shows you how to do something and it's one script, it's probably not the way you want to do it. See how something can be done, though it's not necessarily the way you want it to be done, because they usually don't show you the reusability and how to make it modular. They just show you this is how you can do it. And that's very, very important when you're building something. If you have a single script file, you're probably doing it wrong. Especially a game. Has to be an engine. It's a library of files. So that was essentially it. Let me just show you some of the syntax stuff. So class declaration inside of Flash. Import any of the libraries and tools you need. So if I'm using movie clip, the movie clip, and inside your base class, you always have to your base Flash application, document class, always has to extend some sort of display object, and probably either a sprite or movie clip. This is very important. And as I said before, all the functionality can kind of be seen. You can kind of see it here as to what that means. And what you can kind of do. So it's got an X and a Y property, which means you can theoretically shift the entire stage over. And not that I'd recommend doing it, but let's just show you how to do it just for the fun of it. So if you just draw something on your stage, and I were to draw it at 0, 0, not quite 0, 0, well, whatever, close enough. Now you run it, and you're like, oh, look, the cube's right where I said it would be. Now if I shift the entire world, because, we extend a movie clip, and we could theoretically move the entire world over by 50, then boom, the entire world's over, and so is that object we drew onto the stage. And we can see that how that would kind of work over here. And if we take a look at, X property, what does it do? It's a number. You can click on it. It's also in the display object class. It's a movie clip, and this is why inheritance is so powerful. You can even see it in the engine itself. Movie clip isn't just a class on its own, subset of functionality on its own. It extends a whole bunch of other classes. So what are the different object types you can kind of have? Object types are something like this. So we're talking about, importing functionality. Okay, that's pretty important when you're using different things. If you're using movie clip, and make sure it's imported. And if it's not, it'll tell you. So if I kill this import line, it'll probably give me a whole bunch of errors. And this is sort of like where the I gotta say first. This is sort of where the compiler comes in, where it says, oh, by the way, and because it's a strong type language, it can tell you. It's not something like JavaScript where it's compiled by the browser when it downloads the file. It's a dynamic language. This one is sort of it's compiled down into what it needs to be. And this is as well the definition for the base class, movie clip was not found. Now, this is also very important. When you get a compiler error in any language, if it does show you something, that's only out of, a window pops up. That's a courtesy thing. In Flash, it probably confuses more people than anything else. The fact that it still does run it. In Flash Developer, it won't run it. But nothing you see is going to work. Compiler error is a bad thing. Solve the error, and then you can get back to getting it running. So just adding that line back in, and there we go. Errors are gone. Variable types. So, variable declaration. This is a class declaration, so a very complex object, different things you can theoretically have working. And so we have different variable types. We've got a private var, which can be my bool. And we can just make it a Boolean type. Private var. These are basic types. So bool actually starts with the value. It's going to be, false by default. My int or uint. This could be unsigned or signed. And that starts with a basic value too. That's 0. Private var my number. This is a more complex type where it doesn't have a default value. Well, it does have a default value, and that is nan, which means it is not a number. So if you try using a number like this and say add 1 to it, it would probably not be very happy with you. We could try, I guess. Doesn't hurt. Different languages handle it in different ways. And if we try to trace that, obviously. Oh. Okay, wrong subset of keys got mixed up a little bit. And so my number is nan. Even if I add to it, it has no idea what it is. At some point you have to say, well, it's equal to 0. And then when we trace to it, returns a number. And there are different functions that kind of tell you. You can check whether or not something is nan. You can I don't know if this will work. Is equal to nan. It may work, I don't know. I haven't ever tried it, but theoretically has a couple of different states. It's returning a 1, which means true. Booleans can also be, my bool starts as false. So it may trace out to 0, may trace out to false. So it traces out straight to false. And you can actually test bools against numbers and other things. So it does bool equal to 0. Well, if it's false, it'll be true, and if bool is equal to 1, if it's true, it'll be true. So different things that you can kind of test. You can also test the integers. So is my bool equal to my int? Now, theoretically, if my bool is false and my int is 0, that should be true, but it's not. So if I cast it to int, it'll probably be true. So. Or not. Wow. It's actually kind of surprising. Oh, well. It's just equal to false. Oh, I'm not saving the script. Never mind. Yeah, be sure you save. Yeah, if anything happens and it goes super crazy, yeah, just double check to make sure I saved. I may not have. And we can also modify like a whole bunch of different things. So this dot alpha, if we wanted to, we had something still on the stage, we could kind of make it semi-transparent. But this is also inherent of every movie clip object. Now, if you take a look at Flash, you know, this entire library, you say make a new symbol, you're making movie clips. Movie clips is, you know, almost everything. Why? Because it's got a timeline. Timeline is what a movie clip is. You know, if you've got time and frames, that's kind of what it is. And so you've also got complex objects. So the last two types I'm going to show you is sort of like var my list, which is just sort of like a laundry list of items. You know, you can set it to, this one's equal to null by default, and all other objects, complex objects, are equal to null by default. So if I try tracing my list, you know, it's just going to come out as, and I didn't save, it's just going to come out as null, right? Now, if I put items in it, and this is sort of like a list of objects, you know, it allows you to put similar things together, group similar things together. Now, an array is actually loose typed, which means you can put anything you want. I could say beans 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 high true. Anything you want, you can theoretically just throw in here. Now, if you're expecting it to work a certain way, that's not a good idea. Sorry, I just forgot to save. So there's our output, beans 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and true. Sure. You even put variables in there if you wanted to. So my bool. You know, because variables, what you're not actually storing that variable. You're storing a reference to that variable. So if I were to change, and this sometimes works. It depends. If it's a complex object, that is true. If it's a loose object, sort of, and a very simple object like an int, or a boolean, or a number, it probably won't hold true. So if I were to change this, you know, boolean over here to be equal to, you know, true, we won't see the effect. But if I were to do something like this, yeah, well, I'm not going to show that right now. But, so that's one way. And the other type of list is a private var my vector list. It's actually a vector, which is a strong typed, and then this is strong typed in other languages. It's a list of something. I don't know, whatever you want it to be. It could be movie clips if you want. I'm going to make my numbers. It's equal to vector. I never get the declaration for this right, so, you know, if you're not really sure how to do it, just go to the reference dot vector. And I believe it's something like this. I just put any numbers, any items you want in here. So I'm going to say like 1, 2, 3. Let's test to make sure this is working. 1, 2, 3. Now imagine this. If I tried to push in a string, another function of, and this function you can actually find on the API reference page. You know, lists, and it doesn't matter if it's a vector or array, they both have the same subset of functionality. So, you know, you can either push or pop or do any of these things, and push just sort of like adds an element into the array. So I could theoretically push like a 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And what if I try to push like a string? Hello, kitty. It doesn't like it. In fact, it actually converts it down to an integer for you, but in most cases it'll probably just blow up. So if I said this was a list of movie clips, and I'll come into this line because it's going to blow up to begin with, and it's also initialized is equal to a new I try pushing, boom, it throws an error. Now, cannot convert. It tries to convert it and it fails. So things like maybe numbers, these simple types. Oh, there's also a string. I forgot to include that up there somewhere. Private var my string. This one's also equal to null by default. It tries to, okay, so back to where I was. So it tries to convert it, and if it doesn't, it just throws an error. Now, this is where debugging comes into play. So if you get a lot of these errors and they're stacking up, they're happening every frame, and in Flash Develop, it'll probably just stop you. If you're not using Flash Develop, then you're using, straight up Flash, it won't. It'll just run and show you what's going on. But you have to read these errors. Sometimes they'll give you a number, which means you can kind of look that up. You can just say AS3 something something, whatever number it is in error. Probably find it if you Google it. And if you double click on this, this is sort of like the fanciness of this. You can double click, it'll show you everything that's going on in your scene. This is a debugger. Shows you, inside of main. This is the line 19. I could try calling this is where it failed. Take a look at all the variables that are, kind of currently in play, and you can see what's going on. I just know that, you can't really make a string into a movie clip. It's not possible. Maybe you have to parse it or do something fancy with it, but completely different. It's apples and oranges. Apples and oranges. So wouldn't even bother trying. So for the strings, also they trace out null. They're similar to being a little bit more complex. They don't have a default value, such as like an empty string or something. So if you were to trace out my string, it would be null. And you can also set it. You can set it to anything you want. Now those are the basic types. I will show you other things later, but the first thing I want you to try doing is we're actually going to do a couple things. But the first thing you kind of want to use the API for. And this is not going to be the vector class, it's actually going to be the movie clip class. You got this all set up. Try drawing something dynamically to the screen. This is a really complex one. This will also work if you're using Flash Develop straight up without, having your assets already pre-made. So if you're trying to, let's say, you want to use placeholder assets for the time being, tell your, who knows what, gets your artist gets into make your assets. You can have placeholder assets, programmer assets, make it through code. So why not? That should be our first thing you try to do. Look through the reference documentation. You want to open up all these tabs, all these tabs to show you how these things kind of work. The things with the up arrows, what are those? So, you see an up arrow beside something? It actually means that the functionality is defined in something like a display object. So that's where it is. But because everything extends all the way down the list, you get the advanced functionality. Doesn't really matter if it's an up arrow. Sometimes it's interesting to see. The only reason you really care is to see whether or not you need to use. So let's say if I don't have frames, I don't have an animation, then I wouldn't theoretically be using a movie clip as my base. Sprite's the same thing without, frames, right? Without an animation. So it gives you just sort of a subset of, okay, what do I want to use? Why am I using it? How should it be used? Objects aren't super expensive in Flash. When you think about like how programming used to be, programs used to be a long time ago, you had to be really concerned about every little, byte. Generally, you don't have to be super concerned. Flash is super performant. You can get a lot of things going on, even on mobile devices. So, okay, before you get started, the last thing you have to know is functions. What we see here is a public function. These are variables. We also have functions. And a function allows us to take in, we can send in parameters. So if it says, public function sum, you take in a type number and b of type number, return nothing, then we can do whatever we want. We could even theoretically return a number. And a function is basically a routine. It is, a set of steps. It does something. It's a procedure. It does a procedure for you without you having to do the equation or do it every time. Now, sum is a pretty bad example because, addition is actually pretty simple, and it's probably better not to be a function, just because the cost is so high for functions, as opposed to like these operators. And there are a bunch of different operators. Like addition is one. There's subtraction. There's multiplication, division. All the operator logic can be found on the reference. So if you go to the reference, you say operator. I hope I spelled that right. And operators in Flash, it'll tell you everything you can theoretically do, the operations. There are a lot of fancy ones, and there are examples to go with. Shows you how they work. So if you're not clear about operators, you should probably read this. There are a lot of really, really powerful ones in here too, so if you just want to kind of get an idea of what you can theoretically do, this is a very good thing to read. You'll also notice that there's a new operator that I did use earlier for the new vector declaration. That is generally what is needed. Array is a special case, and strings are a special case. Also numbers, ints, and bools are special cases. You can just assign them with an equals and the value. Difference between a number and an integer. Integer is whole numbers, both in the negative and positive spectrum, and a number is fractions, decimal places. It's got all the decimal places. So it depends on whether or not you're trying to be precise. If you're being precise, then use that. A lot of different other things. So I probably forgot to mention a lot of them. If something does look weird, probably come here. But just to show you that thing kind of working. So if I return the sum of A and B, so A is going to be, let's say, 3, B is 4, and I want to trace that, you can just even trace that straight out. It returns a number, and trace. Hold on. Oh, I forgot to save. Whoops. And trace. Our sum is 7. So that's how functions work, and this is going to be super important when you're looking through the documentation. I probably failed to mention that, but yes, because this is one side of functionality is properties. Properties you can assign sort of like you would a variable. My bool is equal to true, or x is equal to 32, like you saw me do at the beginning. Those are properties. Functions take in parameters and have to be called a different way. So you say sum, it expects an A and a B. They will not work if you just try, if you try doing this, the 4, it'll fail. I didn't save. It'll fail, right? Inaccessible sum through reference static type main. It thinks you're trying to access a property called sum, but it's not. It's a function, and it says illegal assignment. Right? It says good job. It's not what you're supposed to be doing. So they will fail. Don't use them like you would a property. And properties, on the other side cannot be used like functions. I can't just say x32. That'll also blow up. Possibly undefined method x, right? It doesn't see the function. It says you're trying to send it to a function, but it doesn't see where, how. So now the next thing I want you to do is try to draw something dynamically onto the stage. This is super important. And if you don't have Flash and using Flash Develop, this will be super useful to see what's going on, as well as, let's say you're a programmer and you don't have any programmer art, or you want to make programmer art, you don't have any full-on art. Then what you really want to do is you want to get some graphics in there. Knowing how to access that is super useful. So what I want you to do is utilize the reference, find out where drawing is kind of locked away, and do that. Draw a circle to the screen. That's your kind of task. That's kind of test. First thing you should probably try doing. Okay. Now, if you couldn't find it, I will show you. Well, first give it a try. First give it a chance. Pause this. Go ahead and try it. Now, if you couldn't find it, I'll show you where you should be looking, and give it another attempt. It's under the graphics. Click on graphics, takes you to this. Now this is a pretty good example. Shows you full on how to use it. Doesn't show you what this begin fill function is, or draw cycle function is. But you should jump into the reference and take a little bit more detailed of a look. So pause it, go, give it a chance, give it a try. Now, if you've been able to draw that circle, draw a rect. If not, I'm going to show you where everything is kind of found at, which is begin fill. Shows us, specifies the color we want to draw. We have to have a color. Draw a rect. Can either draw a rectangle, and draw a circle draws a circle. Now you could optionally call it end fill. You don't really have to. It'll kind of just guess at it and do it for you. Now, in the example they showed, they have a circle. If I were to copy and paste this code, it would work. So even if you just copied and pasted the code, good on you. Good on you. The other thing you would notice, though, is that it takes in a sprite, not a movie clip, which means if I try running this, it'll fail, which means we have to import it. First thing we got to do, import sprite. Now if we try it again, there's our circle. That's a fairly nice circle. And that's a pretty good first step. You can even do things like modify its X and Y position, exactly as we've seen. So we could say dot x is equal to 50. And it would move the entire circle 50 pixels. It's a radius of 40. Why don't we move it 40 away? Oh my god. Or we can even move it 80. But anyway, that's assignment, and that's the first set. So good on you if you found it. We get another chance to try. Testing functionality. So I'm going to stop here for right now. That's a good first step for first workshop. Got this in. You listened to all the my talking. Good on you. Refer back to this tutorial if you're confused about anything or kind of lost as to where you should be starting and what your goals should kind of be. That's exactly what it's here for. This first one. The next one hopefully we'll get into a lot more important and useful stuff. A little bit more so than what we did for this tutorial, but it should be more useful, a lot more advanced topics, and it'll also be going at a fairly fast rate, fairly fast speed. So try a lot of these examples. It's okay to fail, make mistakes. That's how you learn. Just be good about it. Read, find those mistakes, try Googling, seeing what's going on, and you should be alright. Alright.